Okay, sorry, everybody. I forgot to start that. Okay, so this is a pretty big, broad definition of artificial intelligence, but we've had this sort of idea or whatever of artificial intelligence all the way back in the 1950s, where we're starting to mimic human intelligence with machines. And then we've like stepped up in complexity, going from machine learning, where you're learning from historical data, to these deep learning models that are mimicking human brain function. And now we're arriving at these generative AI models, which aim to create this like original content. Generative AI models encode a simplified representation of their training data, then draw from that representation to create new work that's similar but not identical to the original data. So definitely now we're seeing AI in our daily lives constantly. Can you all think of some common examples where we see AI and maybe list them in the chat? Take a couple minutes to think about it. Oops. So some examples that I have for you. If you've ever used, let's see, Google Chats, yeah, definitely. Spotify, yes, for sure. All these different things that we use every day, Netflix, spell check, Grammarly, some of your like smart home devices. If you're using Google Maps or Apple Maps when you're driving to work, it'll like in real time assess traffic and direct you in other places. But all of these different things rely on machine learning algorithms to make their products work. And so AI is clearly a very helpful tool, which is why we're talking about it now. And so in this workshop, we're going to be focusing on AI in writing, obviously, because this is the Writing Center, right? So in this workshop, we're going to start by understanding the role AI can play as a tool, something that can actually assist you in any of your different writing projects. We're going to learn the appropriate times to use AI and when not to use AI, and we'll go through some examples. Then we'll also go through, when we shouldn't use it and why we should not use it, and some of the like human advantages over using AI. And again, we'll go through some more examples throughout. So we'll be looking at a lot of different pieces of writing throughout this workshop, and a lot of it is like my own writing. So bear with me, it will have oceanography as a central theme. But before we really dive in, I just want to stress that I am certainly not an expert in artificial intelligence by any means, but rather I'm a professional writer, as are all of you as graduate students. So before we begin, I just want to take the time to say now is the time to learn to write and to write well. Certainly we can use AI as a tool, but we shouldn't rely on it because you're the expert in your work and you know best. So keep that in mind as we go through all of this. All right, so let's begin by chatting about how we can utilize AI as a tool to improve our writing. Okay, so AI can be super helpful in the phase of writing that I like to call the polishing stage. In this stage of writing, you have like all of your ideas on paper, and now you're checking for little things, little mistakes, or things you didn't catch before. Here, AI can help with checking for the correct uses of grammar, making sure you're using the same tense throughout a section of a paper. That's really important, especially for like me in scientific writing. We tend to use like the past tense when we're talking about our methods. So sometimes I'll get mixed up and I'll switch into present tense or future tense or something. But using AI, you can say, you know, show me the instances where we're using past tense and see if they're all lined up. You can also check like for common spelling errors, things like that. Another cool way to use it is to, it can help make a piece of writing more concise. So if you want to condense something where you think you're kind of rambling on, it can take the most important information out and put it into like a smaller, more concise paragraph for you. And then there's this thing we use often in writing called reverse outlining. And this is probably one of my favorite uses of AI in the writing process. So for reverse outline, it's basically a summary of each section of your writing. So you can use these outlines to see where your writing feels connected or disconnected. And it's really helpful, you know, if I'm writing a paper and I see I've been working on this project for a long time, I might not see where things are disconnected, but if I use a very like unbiased tool like an AI tool and put this piece of writing into one of these programs, it'll, you know, spit out basically exactly what's there and you'll see what's not there. So it's kind of like an unbiased way to check your work and see if it's all flowing well in that way. The other aspect of the writing process that AI can help with is this like brainstorming stage. If you're given a task, you can ask for an example. For instance, if you've never written a cover letter before, you can ask for an example of a cover letter to just like get an idea of where to start. Also, if you're choosing a topic for a paper, AI might be helpful in understanding the assignment and giving some topics to dive into. Okay, so now let's look at each of these with some examples. Okay, so first I took a piece of writing that I have been working on and I inputted it into ChatGPT, and I just asked to check the passage for correct grammar and to tell me if there were any instances where I was using different tenses. And so you very nicely can just copy and paste it, put it into the generative AI tool, and then it'll spit out its evaluation, right? So here it's saying, nice, it's pretty clear and well written, but there was a couple of things that we caught. So it's really small things, but it does make this passage a little bit stronger. So just changing a couple words here and there for consistency or just better flow in general is pretty nice. So definitely use it for grammar. I'm a big fan of that because also this also just happens in about like 3 seconds, you know, it's very quick. Okay, so then another thing that we can do is rephrasing. So I really like looking at this because sometimes you get stuck in a rut and you're saying the same, it's kind of like you feel like you're writing in a very formulaic way. So sometimes it's cool to put in a piece of writing and you can say, okay, rewrite this phrase for me in 5 different ways. So yeah, if you're not liking the phrasing or you just want different variations of this same idea. So I put this passage in and I said, asked AI to rewrite the passage in 5 different ways that conveys the same meaning. Like, I thought that was a pretty key thing to do because, you know, you don't want to change up the meaning entirely. So when we do that, it comes up with 5 different passages which are all very similar to what I first wrote, but there's a lot of variety. So here, you know, I wouldn't just copy and paste one of these, but I would look and see, you know, which one is getting that point across that I was trying to get at, and see if I can combine what I've written and, you know, some elements of some of these different rephrasings, or variations that I do like. Um, so again, like these are your original ideas, but you're just looking for a fresh way to write them or just polish it up in a different way. Okay, so similarly, we can have the artificial intelligence condense some writing. So here I have it's a short little passage, but it's talking about some portion of my method section. And I, you know, went over like a word limit. So I'm like, okay, can you condense this into a passage that doesn't go above a certain word count? And then it does. It's really nice. It just condenses it down, keeps all the really important information that I wanted, and condenses it down to match whatever word limit I was aiming for. So this can be really good, especially if you know, are writing an abstract for a journal, let's say. Those usually have pretty strict word limits or word counts. So you can go ahead and write your abstract, and if you do go over, you can say, okay, like, can we condense something in this abstract? Can you find any unnecessary words to cut out, anything like that? It can be really helpful in that way as well. So then the next one is that reverse outlining that I mentioned. And like I said, this is probably one of my personal favorite uses of AI as a writing tool. I think reverse outlining is really important to do at the end of your writing projects to see if all of your ideas flow nicely into the next. Sometimes when you have been working on a project for some time, you feel as though the writing is flowing really well, but you're not being super objective because you have been working on all these ideas are in your head, so you know what you're trying to say. Um, but these tools are very objective by nature. They are very logical. That's how they work, right? They're algorithms. So they can show you where your writing is disconnected or where you might be able to improve your transitions between an idea. So for example, I put in, this was like I think this was for like the NSF GRFP or something, but like a research plan. So I inputted this in and I said, can I have a reverse outline? And so it spits out the big topics that I am focusing on, and I can go through and see, okay, like, does this introduction flow well into our research findings, our research goals, the methods, things like that. And so I can really see where I might be missing something or rearrange different orders of paragraphs, things like that. So it can be really helpful in giving you kind of like a non-biased look at work that you've spent a lot of time on. And so the last kind of tool or example I wanted to talk about is understanding an assignment or picking a topic. So in grad school, I'm sure you all have had experiences like this. But in grad school, you might get some assignments from professors that have very little direction. That's pretty common. They may simply say, write a paper on vaccine development. And that's very broad, right? So if you're struggling and you don't know where you would even begin to look for a topic, this might be a good place for that brainstorming activity. So here you can go in and say, okay, I have this term paper. I need to discuss the development of a major vaccine. Can you give me 5 topic ideas? And so this, again, is just like a good place to start. So it'll spit out a couple of different ideas, different vaccines, and you can decide, if any of these are matching up with what you want to do. But even if you don't like any of the suggestions, it gives you an idea of what kinds of topics might have enough of research or information about them that would be plenty to write about and would be good candidates for this like larger type assignment. Okay, so now I want to move on into the realm of like where AI is kind of falling short right now. Because, eventually it might be able to do some of these things, but right now it does have some limits, right? And the thing to remember here is, these tools are made by humans still. So we're still trying to work out the kinks and the bugs, but eventually they might be able to do some of these things. But for now, this is where we're seeing AI kind of fall short. Okay, so in speaking with professors and other like experts in this field, the major areas where generative AI kind of falls short really involve that like creativity realm. So generating new ideas or discussing results is pretty poor right now. AI is not currently made to be like a critically thinking scientist. So it does fall short in that way. So like data interpretation can be not very well done or just completely wrong in some instances. So it's really important to be careful when you're asking it to do certain things like that. And I'll get into those bigger considerations in a little bit. But anyways, often when we read some of this AI generated writing, it tends to give really broad, vague facts and not specific details or numbers. So that can be especially harmful to your writing, making it less impactful. The other thing it's not super well versed in is in writing techniques in general. So sometimes this writing doesn't have very much structure or flow. It's kind of writing in this stream of consciousness kind of way. So just if you imagine just whatever comes to your mind and writing it out on paper. So in that way, it kind of lacks structure, and then your clarity kind of falls short because of that. And lastly, perhaps maybe the most important, there's not really an expressive voice in AI right now. So when you take the human aspect out of writing, it really shows in that word choice and like the lack of passion, right? You're all working on topics in which you are passionate enough to come to graduate school to learn about, right? In one way or another. When you write something, that passion inevitably shines through. So taking your voice out of your writing also becomes super apparent. So we can see this in a couple of examples now. Okay. So here I wanted to talk about data interpretation. So this is obviously very specific to like scientific stuff. So here I gave the prompt to interpret the following data. This data is from a well-known scientific data set that in oceanography we call the Keeling curve, but it's not important if you've never seen this before. It's basically just showing the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. And if you notice here, it's only showing a range between August 25th and September 24th, okay? And so I then asked ChatGPT to like interpret this data, give me some key findings from this data set, and what did I see? So first, it gives some general key points to discuss, which is nice, and it does give a good place to start. Like these 5 topics are important discussion points for sure, talking about the trends in your CO2 concentration, seasonal variations, implications, long-term data, public awareness policy. All of those are great things to discuss. But when you look at the more specific details, it's kind of interesting because it isn't really discussing the data that I inputted. It's talking very generally about what the Keeling curve is, which I didn't even mention like in the prompt. And if you look in that first point where it's talking about our trends, it starts off by talking about data and a like clear upward trend over the decades, but the data I provided was for a single month of this year. So you really need to be careful when it comes to that data interpretation. But again, as a tool, you can use it to, think about these big overarching points. They're like where to start, kind of in that brainstorming phase. So in that way, it is helpful. So then another example I wanted to show was asking about like writing a literature review. So here I asked to talk about this well-known oceanographic phenomenon called coastal eutrophication. Again, it doesn't matter what the content means, but like, let's just look at the results together. So I'll read this one. Coastal eutrophication is a growing environmental concern characterized by excessive accumulation of nutrients, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus, in coastal waters. This phenomenon often leads to harmful algal blooms, oxygen depletion, and significant disruptions in marine ecosystems. The primary drivers of coastal eutrophication include agricultural runoff, urban wastewater, industrial discharges, which introduce high levels of nutrients into coastal areas. As coastal regions serve as critical habitats for diverse marine life and important resources for human communities, understanding the causes and consequences of eutrophication is essential. Addressing this issue requires a comprehensive approach that combines scientific research, policy implementation, and community engagement to protect and restore the health of these vital ecosystems. So on a surface level, that is a pretty good summary of what this kind of phenomenon entails. It gives you some of the like key things about how it happens, why it's important to our ecosystems. However, it doesn't include any references to previous research. So that's a pretty big red flag. It also doesn't really have any specific numbers about, a more impactful introduction to this topic might have given a number of like, how much oxygen is depleted from the water column or something like that. But it's not giving any of those specific numbers that really do kind of make your words more impactful. So it really misses these specific details. And if this were submitted for a class assignment, it might be okay, but professors would have a big problem with, no references. That's a huge thing. And then it definitely would not, make the cut for publication in a journal. Just because, again, there's none of these specific details, none of the references that you're needed to really categorize the problem. You always want to have set up an introduction. So you're showing like all this previous knowledge and then transitioning into where we don't have knowledge. And here it gives a nice overview of the problem, but we don't know anything about like the current state of the research. So that is another thing. Sorry, that was. Okay, and so the last one, this is more of a long example, so I just wanted to do this in a couple of parts. So for this example, I wanted to kind of highlight how AI can't really just it can't describe your experiences better than you, right? So for this last example, I asked for a personal statement for a fellowship. I used the URIs like Dean's Fellowship. I gave the specific criteria. I inputted my CV and specific things I wanted to highlight. And if we look at the criteria for the nomination for the fellowship, the most important criteria to include in your like personal statements are to demonstrate ability and promise of academic achievement, statements of professional objectives and contributions to URI's missions, and any other evidence of promise. So, like I said, I gave it this criteria. I gave my CV and listed some of my like professional goals and things I wanted it to specifically highlight. So let's take a look. So this is a piece of what I wrote. I'm only showing the like first two paragraphs because, you know, it's a long piece of writing, so I didn't want to take up all of your time with that. But I will just quickly read this, and I just want you to listen, and then I will read what I got from the generative AI software. And I want you to kind of just note the differences between these two passages I will show. Okay. All right. So here's what I wrote. Okay. My accrued experiences at the University of Rhode Island all contribute to my record of excellence and closely reflect the various aspects of our university's mission. These experiences have elucidated my aspirations and equipped me for success. During graduate school, I plan to publish each of my PhD chapters while conducting community outreach, mentoring other students, and contributing to the institutional progression of the university. Following graduation, I aspire to be a principal investigator and mentor who conducts mission-driven work while engaging and helping local communities. My greatest hope is that my PhD research and my future projects can further scientific discovery and innovation while also helping people in my community and communities all over the world. My dissertation work aims to quantify the link between Earth's changing climate and phytoplankton physiology. Through this research, I have developed a cellular model and applied it to answer many questions. I've had the opportunity to lead projects and collaborate with many scientists across the world. I have published 11 times, 4 of which I was first author or co-first author, and I've had the opportunity to present 2 oral presentations at Ocean Sciences meetings. I was awarded funding through the GSO alumni funds and departmental scholarships to travel to conferences and pay for student fees. Additionally, I wrote a successful proposal for the Career Cyber Team Project, a collaboration between top research universities in New England to increase high-performance computing fluency among researchers. One of my dissertation chapters was a large collaboration between myself and colleagues in Hungary. For the project, I had the opportunity to travel to the village of Tihon to design, conduct, and lead a large-scale mesocosm experiment. I had to overcome being the only female researcher working in the institute by proving my intellect through leadership and creativity. These scientific achievements are a major part of my record of excellence at URI and demonstrate creativity, scholarship, and intellectual leadership. Additionally, my dedication to community outreach, mentoring, and institutional progress exhibit the remaining core aspects of this university's mission. Okay, and then after that, I go into all the outreach and whatnot. Okay, so that's 2 paragraphs. I packed in a lot of information, and now this is what the AI tool had to say. Okay. I am excited to apply for the Dean's Fellowship at the University of Rhode Island, a program that aligns perfectly with my academic and professional aspirations. My journey as a scientist has been defined by a commitment to research excellence, outreach, and a passion for ocean sciences. I believe this fellowship will provide the ideal platform for me to further my contributions in these areas while enriching the vibrant academic community at URI. Throughout my career, I've had the privilege of publishing 11 research papers reflecting my dedication to advancing knowledge in my field. My work has focused on, briefly describe your research area, where I have sought to address critical questions regarding specific issues or phenomenon. These publications not only underscore my commitment to high quality research, but also demonstrate my ability to collaborate effectively with peers, mentors, and interdisciplinary teams. In recognition of my contributions, I was honored to receive the Careers Award, which has further fueled my enthusiasm for pursuing innovation research while also fostering the next generation of scientists. This award has enabled me to explore novel approaches to specific research goals or projects, emphasizing the importance of mentorship and education in shaping future leaders in our field. Okay, so definitely hits on some of the things I asked it to. But what did you notice between these 2 pieces of writing? You can just throw them into the chat. If you don't have any ideas, that's also fine. I can talk about them. Yeah, missing some details. Definitely. No passion. Yeah. Yeah. Vanilla. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Those are all great observations. So here is what I noticed. So again, like many of you said, it was very general. Um, it got some of the information that I was looking for, but it also, didn't describe things correctly. Like when it was talking about, a certain award I got, it kind of just started filling in information it didn't know, but it was incorrect. So that was, one thing I noticed. The other thing is, yeah, it was just very flat language. It didn't really give any of the like the passion that I have for my research and what I'm doing here. It highlighted a couple of specific examples that I asked it to, but really didn't get into any details. It didn't highlight some of the more interesting like collaboration work I did. It definitely couldn't have spoken to my experience, you know, as a female researcher in a different country. It didn't talk anything about that, obviously, because that's my experience, right? Um, and it was just a bit boring, and I don't think it would really help me stand out as an applicant, right? If somebody got that application and was reading this, I don't think there was anything on it that really made it pop, I don't think anything would really catch a reviewer's eye, and I don't think it would have been funded. So the other last thing is like, I don't know if you guys noticed, but there wasn't any real structure to it. It was much shorter. That was most of what AI generated. So I had, probably, a page and a half more to say in my personal statement. But that was the majority of what the AI software produced. Um, so it didn't hit on a lot of things, but there was just no structure to it. In my writing, I tried to give this like general overview of where grad school has helped me and where I want to go in the future. And then started going into specific examples of like how I'm demonstrating university missions or whatever. But the AI version just simply kind of rattled off some facts and pieces of information and just kind of put it in a little bit of a general structure, but it really was not great. So all of this is to say that AI is a great tool and it does have a place in your writing and it will continue to change and, continue to have a place in your writing. But there are so many more instances where you know best. So trust yourself and be confident in your work. So I'm nearing the end of like our specific examples, but there are a few things I wanted to note about when you do use AI. So I have mentioned these a little bit in throughout, but there are some general concerns like ethical or otherwise right now. So first of all, the accuracy of the information can be flawed. So there have been instances where generative AI tools even provide fake citations that may not exist or may have nothing to do with whatever topic you are speaking on. So really be careful. And if you do use these tools, make sure to double check their work, basically. Generative AI relies on training data sets, and those are created by humans. So these tools can amplify any kind of statistic, systematic, or human error. So there might be some bias in that. Again, watch out for that. And these are mostly, I would say, concerns when you're thinking about when you're asking AI to like generate new ideas. But if you're asking for it to look at your information and check it for something specific, that these things may not come up. So just keep that in mind. There's a general like privacy concern when it comes to AI. They can collect large amounts of personal information. It's not always known exactly how this information is used, can cause some data security and privacy issues. Also, be super careful when you add your unpublished data or writing, because there have been instances where researchers have used this to support their writing, putting in their unpublished work. The AI uses the information as its own when it's answering prompts for other users. So you might lose rights for your own work. So you have to be very, very careful with what you put into these tools. Keep that in mind. In a kind of opposite sense, on the other side of things, it is important to know if you're asking for some like new ideas or for it to create content, that is not your work. So you might have to cite it one way or another if you're relying on it to generate new content and ideas. And this also will change depending on, if you're in a class, a professor might ask you to cite a certain way. The other thing that is also happening now is journals, like that peer-reviewed journals that you publish to, they also have new kind of standards for using AI with your publications. So definitely keep that in mind and check on that as you're publishing. Just review those policies as you're working on that kind of work. And then lastly, as an oceanographer and climate kind of scientist, I'm obviously interested in that. There are more studies coming out that are looking at the impacts of AI on our climate. So there's general concerns about our large water usage involved, as well as the processing power coming from fossil fuels. So these are some general things that you need to keep in mind as you're using these tools. Okay. And lastly, so please remember, you are the expert here. You are working on something you're passionate about, and that will shine through in your work. Learning to write well is really essential to your success as a graduate school or as a graduate student. You'll be doing so much writing while you're here at URI. So it's really important that you get that experience and develop your own writing, and you're not relying on these tools too much. I would say definitely learn how to use these tools to elevate your writing. That's great. They're tools for a reason. You should use them. But do not rely on them to generate any kind of creative or detailed pieces of writing because they're just not there yet. And lastly, come to the writing center when you are working on something. And if you do use AI, I have had appointments where people have come to me and said, I did use this to like check my work, but the voice sounds weird and I want to like talk with it with a human and to like figure out how I can improve or make things better. So come to us and we can do that. We can help you fine tune your writing skills. We'll work on some of that clarity and structure. We can help you expand on your ideas. So if you're kind of stuck, and you can talk it out with us and understand like, okay, I know what I'm thinking, but I don't know how to like translate that into words. Because when you use AI, sometimes you still have to translate something into words to ask a proper question, right? So if you can't translate it into like a good prompt or beautiful question, come talk to us and we can help you with whatever you're thinking about, okay? And lastly, we can help you put your voice back into your work, and really work on adding that, like making sure that your passion and expression really shines through. Okay, so I know that was a ton of stuff, but thank you all for coming today. And if you have any questions now, please feel free to unmute, raise your hand, or throw any questions you may have in the chat. I will be sending this recording and these slides out to all of you that have participated today. So you can have them for your reference later. Okay. Okay, Victor, you want to go ahead and unmute?
Yeah, thank you so much for the session today. Very
Yeah.
enlightening. So I was going to ask, are there tools, because if you trying to get an idea from AI and maybe you try to copy some part of it that is relevant to you, to your work, I know sometimes there are like tools that they use to check the level of plagiarism to know if it is like AI generated. So how do you advise that we come back to that? Like, do you copy from AI, or we just type and rephrase the words? How do you advise that we deal with that?
So I would say, like, specifically when you ask like AI to, rephrase something or, ask it for different ways to write something, I would say that you probably shouldn't take exactly what it says and spits it, like what it spits out. But like here, let me go back to um this slide. Where was that? Here. So in here, you're inputting like your own words. So what it does spit out is just different ways to say what you've already said. So you can kind of like pick and choose what is kind of hitting on what you were trying to say. And it's okay in that case, I would say, to copy and paste some information. But in in instances where you're asking like, write me an introduction for this, I would definitely say don't copy and paste that because your for your assignments or whatever, your professors can go into these AI things and say, write me a introduction for this topic, and it will show up and it'll probably be the same or very similar. So I would be careful in that way.
Oh, all right. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. See. And are there any specific AI apps you use or recommend to graduate students for research? Okay. Yes, Rebecca answered that. I also recommend like Grammarly, anything like that. Those AI tools are really great. Is it authorized to use AI in academic publishing? Right. So each journal is going to have a policy about that. So when you're applying to or you're submitting work to different journals, review their AI policies and see what they're saying. Again, if you're using it for checking grammar or rephrasing or these polishing things, that's great. But if you're using it to try to, generate new ideas and content, I would say that's not going to fly. That's not going to go well during your academic publishing phase. Okay. All right. Any more questions? How do I find my voice? Right. So developing your voice, it takes a little bit of practice, but one thing that I do or I did at the beginning of grad school to practice that kind of thing is think of a topic, like, think about how would you describe your research, and then sit down with just like a blank Word document and talk about your research, just like stream of consciousness. Like, what are you studying? Why are you studying it? And then read through it and kind of see where where your passion for your work is shining through. And that's where you can identify where your voice sounds like. Developing your voice comes very naturally. That is dependent on each person. So every time you've done any kind of writing assignment or personal statement or anything like that, you have been working on like your voice. So that's a tricky question, but I would say, even like non-academically, like journaling is a helpful tool to work on your writing and just like understanding what your voice is, and it's just your voice on paper, so I don't know if that answers your question, but I hope so. And just be confident in your writing, because
Also,
again,
can I say
you know
something?
best.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to follow up on also what Ritesh is asking. Sorry for mispronouncing your name. So I'm teaching English. That's very normal. I would also add, you also should read. I think when you read different ways, honing. I mean, when you read and you see how each and every voice is being, foregrounded, then you're gonna also develop some kind of, way of incorporating that manner into your own writing. So I think also reading is as fundamental as honing your voice using, as our host beautifully said, some kind of stream of consciousness technique, which is very beautiful. But if you don't read, it doesn't work. And also, if you agree with me, there's no way of escaping that? Well, the highlight for me is I didn't know that AI can plagiarize our work, which is very concerning because as you polish your work, you send it there to AI, as you like you do the Grammarly thing, and then you find out, oh, like I'm really concerned because I've been really, sharing a lot, as far as my work is concerned. So how to Okay, this is, I mean, it's really difficult to dance around it, but let's say if you're
Sure.
going to proofread your original thought and say ideas,
Yep.
how to make sure, that AI is not going to use and store that information algorithmically and share with other people. That's the thing, because it's
Yeah.
inevitable not to use AI to perfect the
Right.
writing, but in the
Mhm.
meantime, it is very tantalizing not to use it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So how to make sure, that AI is not going to steal the work,
Yeah.
between quotation marks. The second question now is, some of us also are teaching, so I'm teaching writing.
Mhm. Okay.
And also, like, this is like walking on eggshells. The thing is, you may tell your students, okay, you may use AI to write on specific topic like undergrad class. But the
Mhm.
thing is here is like, once you are going to incorporate even a better version of your essay,
Mhm.
is that still plagiarism or not? Like, I don't want to have these discussions in class, to be honest with you. We don't have time. But the thing is, it's
Yeah.
like we are dancing around it. At the
Yeah.
same time, like we have to be very aware also of these things. There's so much going
Yeah.
on. Do you know what I mean? I mean, my
Yeah.
anxiety is speaking now. So I hope you
Yeah.
get my yeah.
No, I got you. I got you. So for your first question, I would say if you're going to, if you want like AI to check your work for like spelling, grammar, that kind of stuff, I would use tools that are specific for that. So instead of putting it into like chat GPT, that's like that might store data unconsciously, or I guess I don't know, not unconsciously, but you know what I mean. It's gonna store, it might just store data, but things like Grammarly, which is that kind of tool that is specifically designed to check your grammar and spelling and make sure you're phrasing things like in a um, coherent way. Do that is safe. I would say they're not storing data about like your actual research or your ideas. That is really just reading what you have and saying how it could be better. So I would stick to those kinds of tools if that is a concern. And then for your second question, talking about like the plagiarism aspect, that is a tricky topic for sure. And I think it's important to be like open with your students. I do think it's a fine line, a fine balance between when it's plagiarism or when it's just helping your writing. So when they are using it in these ways, um, kind of like those examples that I showed about like, okay, here's my original piece of writing. Please give me 5 different ways how to write it, or how can I make this more concise? Um, check it for grammar, that kind of stuff. I think that is still using it as a tool and not plagiarizing, because it's still your original thought, your original ideas. Um, when it gets into the other thing, the like the plagiarism part is when you're asking it to kind of write me an introduction, write me interpret this data, um, give me a summary, like a review of a book, or you know,
Exactly.
something like that. So it's tricky for sure, and it might be an interesting thing to talk about with students. But I think one thing that is important is to kind of don't just straight up say no to your students, because I think it can be a good tool, and sometimes, you know, when you say don't use it, it makes it more interesting and they might start relying on it in different ways. So teaching them how to use it as a tool could be a way to kind of combat them using it as a crutch, let's say.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Okay. All right, so we are at 3 o'clock. I'm gonna stop sharing now. Does anybody else have any last minute burning questions? And also, you know, feel free if you have specific questions about your writing, you can come to the Writing Center and we can talk about that too. So any of that. But thank you all for joining today. Really appreciate it.